All right, I will call this session of the Senate Judiciary Committee to order. Will the Secretary please take the roll?
Senator Harris, Senator Dondero Loop, Senator Orenshaw, Senator Wynn, Senator Hansen, Senator Krasner, Senator Stone, Chair Scheibel.
Here, thank you. Welcome everybody to Senate Judiciary. We have 2 bills on for a hearing today and 4 bills on work session. And as always, we have members coming in and out for their other presentations and whatnot. So I'll just reiterate my request that you don't take it as a sign of disrespect or inattention if they're not here, or if they're looking at a computer or a phone trying to coordinate how they're going to get to be in 3 places at once. So with that being said, we have 2 guests with us today to present their bills, and I will start with AB 272 and open up the hearing right now. Please come on up and present whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Chair Scheibel and members of the Judiciary Committee. I am Assemblywoman Danielle Monroe Moreno. I represent Assembly District 1, which I think is the best district in the entire state. That's why we're number 1. And I'm here to introduce Assembly Bill 272. Joining me in presenting today in Las Vegas, we have U.S. Postal Inspector Shad Metley, and here with me at the table is Director Beth Schmidt with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department's Office of Intergovernmental Services. And with the Chair's permission, I'd like to provide a brief overview and summary of the bill and then hand it over to my co-presenters. Mail theft is a serious crime that can have significant consequences for individuals, businesses, and organizations. Mail often contains sensitive personal information such as bank account details, credit card statements, and social security numbers. If this information falls into the wrong hands, it can be used for identity theft. Mail theft also results in financial losses for individuals and businesses. For example, checks and credit card payments stolen from the mail can be cashed and used to make unauthorized purchases. There are also legal documents sent via mail, such as contracts, deeds, court documents that can be stolen, leading to legal disputes and financial losses. Lastly, the disruption of services for businesses and organizations relying on mail for communications with its clients, suppliers, and customers can affect their operations. Both federal and state laws play an important role in preventing and prosecuting mail theft. Federal laws provide a foundation for addressing mail theft issues involving U.S. Postal Service mail, while state laws can provide broader coverage to address mail theft issues involving all mailboxes. This is the intent of Assembly Bill 272. And just a brief overview of the bill. In Section 1 of the bill, it provides that a person commits the crime of mail theft if the person knowingly, willfully, with the intent to deprive, injure, damage, or defraud another, takes, destroys, hides, embezzles mail, or obtains any mail by fraud or deception. It also, in Section 1, subsection 2, identifies that if a person buys, receives, conceals, possesses mail, and knows or reasonably should have known that the mail was unlawfully taken or obtained. Subsection 3, buys, receives, conceals, or possesses personal identifying information and knows or reasonably should know that the personal identification information was unlawfully taken. In Section 1, it further puts out the crime for the bill. A person who commits the crime of mail theft is guilty of a Category D felony, which is punishable by a term of imprisonment in state prison for a minimum term of not less than 1 year and a maximum term of not more than 4 years and a fine of not more than $5,000. The bill will become effective on July 1st, 2023, and you should have it should be up on Nellis and submitted to you a friendly amendment that we are presenting to you today to strike out the personal identifying information in Section 1, subsection 2, and Where the word says breaks open, it would just be opens. And in Section 1, subsection 4C, it also, to make sure we removed it, everywhere in the bill, the personal identifying information. So with that, I will turn it over to my co-presenters, and I believe we'll go to Shad in Las Vegas first.
Perfect. And I just wanted to clarify that the amendment is on Nellis. I accidentally had it uploaded twice. I think once with your name at the top and once with the District Attorney Association at the top, but the content is the same. So I'm sure my committee can figure out how to read it. I'm sorry, go ahead. Is Mr. Shad or Chad in Las Vegas? Go ahead.
Thank you. Shad Matheny, U.S. Postal Inspector. The United States Postal Inspection Service investigates crimes involving the Postal Service, its employees, and the U.S. mail. One of our primary focuses here in Nevada is the theft of U.S. mail and the subsequent identity theft and other financial crimes associated with it. Nevada is currently ranked 5th in the nation in identity theft reports and 3rd in fraud reports. These combined frauds and scams resulted in more than $100 million in losses in the state in 2022. Nevada also experiences one of the highest incidences of volume mail theft in the country. Individuals involved in mail theft are nearly always also involved directly or indirectly in identity theft. There were more than 3,100 complaints about stolen or missing mail just in the Las Vegas area from February 2021 through March of 2022. Nationally, mail theft reports increased by 600% from 2017 to 2020, and mail theft volume attacks more than doubled from 2019 to 2022. It is projected there will be more than 50,000 mail theft volume attacks in 2023 across the nation. The federal system generally does not have the resources to prosecute all federal offenses, so they enact thresholds to identify cases appropriate for federal investigative attention. As there is no state mail theft statute in Nevada, individuals encountered by law enforcement in possession of stolen mail may not even be charged if no financial crime has yet been committed. Passage of this bill will significantly increase the resources available to address the expansive problem of mail theft in Nevada. The sole purpose for and ultimate result of mail theft are serious financial crimes such as forgery, credit card fraud, and identity theft. These crimes create a serious hardship on residents who then need to remedy or repair issues impacting their financial security or identity. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel and the committee. For the record, my name is Beth Schmidt, and I represent the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. I want to thank Assemblywoman Monroe Marino for asking me to present with her. Prior to my current position, I spent 3 years as a financial crimes sergeant with the LVMPD, and in that role, I saw the result of mail theft on a daily basis. LVMPD Financial Crimes Section investigates between 400 and 500 financial cases per month. A large portion of those cases, including identity theft, fraud, and forgery, stem from mail theft. We believe that AB 272 will help address fraud and identity theft. We have existing NRS for law enforcement to use to charge someone for using personal identifying information, so that's why we have removed that from the bill. AB 272 focuses on acquiring and possessing stolen mail and mailbox keys. So how does the crime of mail theft work? Criminals target residential community mailboxes, those silver boxes on your street. They either pry the box open, or more commonly, they use a stolen postal key or a homemade postal key to open the community mailbox. In less than 1 minute, they can open the box, remove all of the mail, throw it into a vehicle, and then move on down the street to the next box and do the same thing. They will do this in broad daylight. Eventually, they sift through the mail and they take checks and cash and anything with personal identifying information. You send a check to your granddaughter for her birthday for $5. Well, let's say we send it for $10 because you're generous. That check is made out to in your granddaughter's name. What they will do is they will wash that check, they will put a different name on it, and they will change the dollar amount as well. And when they do that, they will oftentimes put the name of someone else that isn't a victim of identity theft, whose identity they have stolen in a previous mail theft. Some other ways that criminals will use personal identifying information that they obtain through mail theft is they'll create credit cards, IDs, and driver's licenses. They'll take out home and car loans in your name. They'll lease apartments in your name. They will open bank accounts and utility services. Nevada law enforcement doesn't track how many mailboxes are broken into each day because breaking into a mailbox is not actually a crime under NRS. Mail theft is it's a federal crime. Nevada is a large state, and part of the reason that this bill is brought forward is it's large and it's rural. And the United States Postal Inspectors, they only have a handful of investigators to assist local law enforcement. And that is why this has been brought forth. Because in the state of Nevada, if law enforcement currently catches someone in the act of breaking into a mailbox, we do not have an NRS to charge them with. If we stop a vehicle with the back seat full of hundreds and hundreds of pieces of unopened mail, we don't have an NRS to charge them with. And if we recover bags and bags of unopened mail during the service of a search warrant, we don't have an NRS to charge them with. The only NRS that we have in relation to mail theft is a gross misdemeanor charge for possession of a burglary tool. And we use that for the possession of the stolen or the manufactured United States postal mailbox key. It is important to note that those postal keys, which are part of this bill, they are considered so valuable by mail thieves that it is not uncommon for mail delivery people to be robbed at gunpoint for the key. And those keys they keep on their person during their shift. And the reason they're so valuable is those keys give criminals access to an unlimited amount of mail, which equates to an unlimited amount of personal information about people. AB 272 is a much-needed tool for law enforcement to combat mail theft and to help prevent identity theft, fraud, and forgery.
Danielle Monroe Moreno for the record. There is just one other thing I'd like to add. In the bill where it says postal service, it means the U.S. Postal Service or a private common mail carrier as well. So with that, Madam Chair, we'll stand for questions.
All right. Do members of the committee have questions? We'll start with Senator Krasner.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. I appreciate how you've put these terms in here regarding the mail theft. Is it possible that this could be construed to mean an email letter?
I don't believe so because it has the postage affixed. But any letter, postcard, parcel, package, bag, no. I do not see how it could be.
Well,
Where are you seeing that? Because I'm missing it.
3A, as used in this section, mail means any letter, so that could be an email letter. And then also that the Postal Service delivers to the postal customer. I don't know. Is Yahoo a postal service? I don't know. Is AOL? I don't know. And then D, Postal Service means United States Postal Service or a private common mail carrier. I don't know. I'm just wondering if it could be construed that way. Thank you.
Danielle Monroe Moreno for the record. It would mean U.S. Postal Service. You have FedEx that delivers things. You have UPS that delivers things. But Yahoo, AOL, Gmail, those are emails. They are not addressed in this legislation at all.
All right. Other questions from members of the committee? Senator Wynn.
Thank you, and thank you for that presentation. So is this is a federal crime, though? Is that correct? And so is that who is currently prosecuting these crimes?
Beth Schmidt for the record. One of the problems that we come up against is in Las Vegas, we do have postal inspectors that will come out if they're available out to the scene, but a lot of times they are not available. In the northern part of the state, in the rural part of the state, and Shad may be able to correct me on this, but my understanding is that there are 4 postal inspectors that cover northern Nevada and northern California. So if you have someone who's broken into a box, it's very, very difficult to get them out to be able to prosecute that case.
But as law enforcement, in those local law enforcement agencies, if you see someone committing a crime or you're investigating a crime, you can refer them over for federal prosecution. Isn't that kind of how that works?
Yes, you can. The problem is that we end up in Las Vegas. Las Vegas Metro takes the majority of those cases because there are so many.
And then I guess my other question is, you gave that scenario of if you pulled someone over and they had like a car full of mail, and it wasn't their information, wouldn't you be able to arrest them and charge them with possession of identifying information of another, which is a felony?
Beth Schmidt, for the record. Yes, Senator, that is correct, and that is the only charge that we would have, is that personal identifying information.
And that's a felony, right?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Shad Matheny for the record. Also, though, in that instance, if the mail is unopened, sometimes the DA's office will not charge an identity theft charge for mail that is unopened.
And just follow up, Chair, if I may. If there's someone from prosecutor's agency can talk about whether or not they would not charge or they feel like that would not cover that, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Other questions? Senator Hansen.
Thanks. Actually, that last one stimulated mine. Now, so essentially, I was more like on the same page as Senator Wynn. There's a federal charge normally, and I think of anything dealing with mail, I always think those are federal issues. But the state, you guys actually aggressively prosecute people that you have an option where you can push it off to the feds, but if the feds aren't available, then you have the state court system that you can use?
Beth Schmidt, for the record. It really does boil down to the thresholds that the feds would have. And so for us, if we catch someone breaking into the box and they've taken 3 or 4 letters, that's not something that's going to reach that threshold for the feds.
Okay, so with this bill, you guys could prosecute. I mean, right now, under existing law, if I'm breaking into a mailbox, I'm in a rural area, you catch me and I've got some guy's credit cards or whatever, is there lesser charges currently than felonies? I mean, if you just that description, just me breaking into somebody's thing, and I'm just kind of wondering, because felony, I hate to send people to prison for doing something stupid, but on the other hand, if it's a consistent problem, do we turn over the feds, where it's obviously a much more serious charge? They don't have any misdemeanor things that I'm aware of. I mean, so do we, under current law, how do you charge them? Are they always felonies?
Beth Schmidt, for the record. They would be, but I have concerns with kind of seeing mailbox theft as kind of a dumb mistake or a stupid mistake, because it's a very calculated move that someone is doing it, and what we see at the local level is the damage that can be caused to a citizen who doesn't even know that their mail was stolen. You may not even realize that you had a credit card coming to you. You may not even realize that you had something that came with personal identifying information. So it could be weeks down the road until you find that out.
Okay, well, I didn't mean to trivialize it, but
But
I'm just trying to say, I'm picturing in my mind some stupid high school kid who goes and busts into somebody's mailbox, and you guys catch him and he's going through mail looking for something, and he hasn't necessarily taken the credit card or whatever and actually done a purchase or anything. Just kind of, I don't want the kid going to prison for 1 to 5 or whatever.
Beth Schmidt, for the record, this is not high school kids that, in my experience, that I have seen. This is organized mail theft.
Okay.
So they are hitting dozens of these boxes at a time, and then they're sifting through them, and then we oftentimes will find the results of that. Sometimes we'll find it during a search warrant, an unrelated search warrant.
So the whole purpose of the bill is just to give you guys an enhanced ability to go after the really bad actors, not
Yes,
my
sir.
imaginary scenario here, huh? Okay, very good. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Senator Stone?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick comment. I just want to applaud the Assemblywoman for bringing this forward. I own a number of units where they have a community mailbox. And as you know, if you get a big package, they put a key inside your mailbox to go open one of the larger boxes. My tenants can't even get larger boxes. They have to be delivered to the office now because there's such rampant theft. That has been curtailed a little bit because we put cameras in there. All right, but these professionals that have been so eloquently articulated, they come in with hoodies. It's kind of hard to get them, although we have license readers when they go out of the complex. So we have been able to follow up with local law enforcement on this. Also had a check sent to one of my vendors, and he had his mailbox broken into, and they successfully, if you can believe it, they forged his name and then put a fictitious name in and cashed a check for over $2,000. It took me about 3 months to get recovered back, but this is a pervasive problem throughout the state of Nevada. I know in southern Nevada it certainly is in multifamily developments, and so thank you for bringing this forward.
Other questions from members of the committee? Senator Orenshaw.
Thank you. And Assemblywoman Moreno, thank you for bringing the bill. Certainly, I think we've all been actually horrified when we've read the news accounts, especially of some of the armed thefts of mail carriers that we've read about. I know in my neighborhood where I live, many of us have, in the last few years, switched to locking mailboxes just because of mail theft. And I guess one question I do have, though, if this statute passes, and maybe my question is for Director Schmidt, do you envision overlap with the postal inspectors where there could be federal charges and state charges, or would one supersede the other? If Metro's investigating it, would it be a local charge and then we wouldn't have the postal inspectors charging, through the U.S. Attorney's Office? Or thank you.
Beth Schmidt for the record. We work at Metro, we work very, very closely with the postal inspectors. In fact, Chad and I have worked on numerous cases together, and the decision is made which way to go, whether we're going to stay at the state level or that the feds will take it. And that really is thresholds that they have. So for the smaller thefts, that would stay with Metro more often than not. But that is something we would discuss with them.
And brief follow-up, Chair? And that's under existing law. Right now, there's good communication between state and federal authorities as to whether this would be a state prosecution versus going through the U.S. Attorney's Office and federal postal inspectors.
Beth Schmidt for the record. Yet nothing would change. What would happen is we would have that jurisdiction on cases where it didn't meet the federal thresholds.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, Assemblywoman. Thanks, Chair.
Any other questions? Senator Dondero Loop.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Assemblywoman, for bringing the bill. I, not being a lawyer, I have a couple of questions. So is this both crimes then? Is this a state crime and a federal crime together? I feel like as I know it's a federal crime, but like as I envision it, and when I hear you talk about it, if somebody had on camera, for example, somebody breaking into mailboxes, and you knew that they were a known person in the neighborhood for some reason, they'd been arrested for car theft or something, would both those crimes be charged? Because they're breaking and entering into a mailbox. They're ruining public property. I don't know.
Beth Schmidt for the record. If I'm understanding your question, Senator, currently, if we catch someone breaking into a mailbox, whether they damage it or not, in Nevada, there actually is not an NRS that we can use. So this would give us that NRS to charge them. Otherwise, the other option is to have the United States Postal Service respond out. But it's such a common occurrence for us. And then it's difficult in the rurals because they don't have the ability to have the federal investigators respond to the scene.
So even if you, as a police woman, saw somebody breaking into a mailbox, it would still be a federal crime right now?
Beth Schmidt for the record, yes.
Okay, that clarifies it. Thank you.
Other questions from, go ahead, Senator Wynn.
Thank you. Sorry, I just get really nervous when I see these crimes that are state crimes that have additional corresponding federal crimes. Like we see oftentimes in my practice, you'll see a state charge of possession of a firearm by a prohibited person or an ex-felon. But there's also a or a federal crime for that same thing. And under the law, you can be charged in both of those places. For the same crime. There's no double jeopardy issues because they're in different jurisdictions. So I'm just concerned because you had mentioned that where the intention on some of this bill was because of these, I guess, mail rings, like crime rings, like mail theft crime rings. And then, but you also said that, the feds wouldn't pick them up unless they were big like crime ring kind of situation. So would you envision this more in the rural jurisdictions that we would use this, or would we be using this like in our urban areas as well?
Beth Schmidt, for the record, speaking from the local law enforcement, we will be using it both rural, but we would also use it in Las Vegas with the smaller cases, the cases that the feds don't pick up. But the communication is there today. There is no intention of prosecuting in both.
Other questions? Senator Stone.
Again, just to follow up on that conversation. So we have it as a federal crime. We have it now as a state crime. And I know that you have conversations with the U.S. Postal Inspector, and between the two agencies, you decide which route you're going to go, federal or state. But there is an option, just to address my colleague from Southern Nevada's concern, that both could file if they wanted to file. Could you have both a federal charge and a state charge if both parties determined that it was appropriate to do so?
Beth Schmidt, for the record, my understanding is yes.
Other questions? Go ahead, Vice Chair Harris.
Thank you, Chair. I apologize for not being here to be able to see the full presentation. Am I understanding that if right now you were all called and said, hey, there's some mail theft, you'd be like, sorry, nothing we can do about it?
And Beth Schmidt, for the record, it would depend on the totality of it, but if you said our mailbox was broken into, yeah, there is nothing we can do about that. We would refer that to like a damaged post box, even with video, someone breaking into a box, we would refer that to United States Postal Inspectors.
And is the problem that the USPS postal inspectors aren't responding when you all forward something to them?
Beth Schmidt, for the record, it's not that they're not responding, but they don't have a lot of inspectors that cover the state. And so there are a lot of crimes that we have victims, and we're not able to do anything for those victims. So I believe you may have been not here, but there are only a handful that cover the entire northern part of the state, and they also have jurisdiction over Northern California.
Have there been discussions between law enforcement agencies and the USPS to attempt to address this in some other way? Maybe like an MOU, or right aside from creating a state crime?
Beth Schmidt, for the record, I think we could have Shad, who is a United States Postal Inspector, speak to that.
Thank you, Shad Matheny, for the record. No, there have not been discussions about a formal MOU or anything of that nature. The purpose of this, the result of this would be to kind of plug that gap in a crime that rises to a substantial federal interest or the thresholds that the prosecution needs, and the smaller crimes of mail theft that don't include a financial component that is chargeable in the state. So it really is just seeking to plug a gap in the statutes now.
One more, if I may, Chair. Thank you. Do we know how many other states have laws similar to this?
Shad Matheny, for the record. I believe currently 11 other states have state mail theft statutes, including our neighbors, California, Oregon, Washington, and Utah, all have state mail theft statutes.
All right, one last one, I promise, Chair. Thank you. I mentioned the idea of an MOU or some kind of agreement. Would that, if implemented, be a potential solution to closing this gap?
Shad Matheny, for the record. I don't believe it would without further investigation in that, because the issue is the threshold set for the prosecution. So having having an MOU still wouldn't allow a federal crime to be charged in the state, and it would not, a state crime of a few dozen pieces of mail stolen or a few hundred pieces of mail stolen may not rise to the federal level, the federal threshold. So an MOU probably would not plug the hole that I'm speaking of.
So does the federal law have a higher threshold of the amount of mail that has to be stolen? Or are we talking about how much mail has to be stolen to make it worth a federal prosecutor's time?
Shad Matheny for the record. I can't speak for the U.S. Attorney's Office in that regard. All I can say is that there are federal thresholds when we try to bring cases, whether or not they will be pursued.
Okay, well,
And
you don't
things
have
that
to.
go into that, things that go into that calculus is the number of victims, the type of victims, whether it's a sophisticated scheme, criminal enterprise, gang-related, things like that, and then whether or not volume, mail theft methods were employed, and other things of that nature. But so there is a calculus that goes involved with those thresholds, but I can't speak to the exact number of pieces of mail or whether there is or what components go into that.
So my question was more about whether that calculus is actually in statute, right? We shall consider these factors, or if it's about, prosecutor discretion.
Shad Matheny for the record. Yeah, to answer your question specifically, it is prosecutor discretion. It is not in statute,
Okay,
to my knowledge.
thank you.
Senator Orenshaw.
Thank you, Chair. And the Vice Chair's question actually spurred a question for me. And it might be data or statistics that you don't have now, Mr. Matheny, but maybe you could provide the committee with later. I'm just wondering if there's any recent data or statistics last year or two as to, mail thefts that the Postal Inspector's Office has inspected, either in Southern Nevada or statewide, referrals for prosecution to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and how many of those were led to a prosecution versus didn't. Is there any data we could look at, or do you have that data now? And if not, could you provide it to us?
Shad Matheny for the record. No, I don't have access to that data right now. One important thing to remember too about mail theft is that many instances of mail theft go completely unreported or unnoticed by the individuals. So the scale of the problem of mail theft isn't accurately reflected in either state or federal charges brought and prosecuted or declined for prosecution. The scale of the mail theft problem in Nevada is quite large and much larger than would be reflected by that data.
Thank you, Mr. Matheny. I appreciate it. If there is any data, though, I'd be interested in if there's any data, how many referrals for prosecution were made from the Office of Postal Inspector. I'd sure appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Other questions?
Madam Chair,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Danielle Monroe Moreno for the record. We've talked a lot about larger organized crimes, but think about it like this. An incident that happened in my district. I have a senior citizens community, right? The residents of the community saw a gentleman at the mailbox that looked like a mailman and was going in, and they thought putting in mail. They didn't know until the next month that a credit card had been taken or mail had been taken because the person at that mailbox had dressed up to look like a mail person. So they didn't know to report it to the police because they didn't know they were victims of mail theft until much later. So it happens on a small scale, but it also happens on a much larger scale. And when you have a senior citizen who's on a fixed income and someone deprives them by taking their information and their entire life savings because they're at a fixed rate living facility, I want you guys to think of it on both the small scale, but on the larger scale, but on that small scale where maybe just $5,000, but all that person had was $6,000. And sometimes it is that organized crime where they're going to all those mailboxes and all those $5,000 issues add up, and that's a person's life that's interrupted and sometimes devastated. So that was my reason for bringing this, because I've seen what it has done to people. And as a former law enforcement officer in the corrections facility, I saw people who got arrested for a crime that they had committed, but it wasn't them because someone stole their identity, and what they had to go through to prove that it wasn't them because someone had stole their identity through mail theft.
All right, other questions? I also have a couple of questions. I'm still struggling to think of a case in which, on that small scale, we wouldn't have another prosecutorial tool like theft or embezzlement or possession of personal identifying information or impersonating another person. I mean, all I can think of is if somebody broke into my mailbox and all they got was, the Bed Bath & Beyond coupons, and I've, lost nothing financially. I guess if I were to call Metro and say, hey, someone stole Bed Bath & Beyond coupons from my mailbox, this is the bill that would fix that gap, because that's the person who we can't prosecute right now. But personally, yeah, people shouldn't be breaking into mailboxes regardless, but I don't see a proliferation of missing Bed Bath & Beyond coupons. So I'm trying to understand who is the victim who is falling through the crack, because it's not possession of a personal identifying information, it's not theft, it's not fraud, it's not embezzlement, but it is mail theft.
Beth Schmidt, for the record, when someone opens a mailbox, whether they break in or they use a key, their intent is to go in. It is not to get the Bed Bath & Beyond coupon. They are looking for personal identifying information. They are looking for credit cards to use that come through the mail. So they just got unlucky with you. But when they open it, they are going in with the intent to steal something that is of value.
That makes sense to me. And so I guess you're saying that there are enough instances where people actually see others in the act of breaking into a mailbox that we are prevented from having law enforcement respond and stop a crime in progress because there's no law on the book criminalizing the behavior of that crime in progress, only the results of the crime.
Beth Schmidt, for the record, a lot of them we get at Metro are going to be on Ring doorbell cameras, because people will go out in the morning and they'll see that the box has been pried open. And so there will be some Ring mailbox video, or in the instance of what Senator Stone said, that is a very common thing in large apartment complexes, communal living, where there will be repeated breaking in because the potential to get something of value is so high that they will repeatedly break into the mailboxes, and that's where those keys come in, is they don't have to damage it. And I, in fact, have seen someone in my neighborhood I thought was a genuine contracted person, so they didn't have a uniform. So I just thought they were contracted by Postal. And we later found out, weeks later, that person was actually stole the mail that day.
Okay, thank you. I think those are all of my questions. Actually, I do have one more. What was the thought process behind casting, this wide a net, as opposed to, because I'm sure you discussed the possibility of bringing a bill instead that criminalized organized mail theft, that had thresholds in it, that targeted those, large scale or medium scale rings, somebody who is consistently trying to, even if they fail, even if all they ever get is, an old coupon or, a credit card offer, not a real credit card. What was the calculus to land on this method instead of pursuing, mail theft rings?
Beth Schmidt, for the record, the rings that you're talking about, those are the calls that we at Metro would call out the postal inspectors and the ones that Shad would come out and respond to. But there are just so many instances of people being victims of mailbox theft that's what we were looking at capturing, as well as assisting those jurisdictions in the rural area that don't have postal inspectors who can come out and assist them.
Okay, thank you. All right. I think that covers all of our questions. We really do appreciate you taking the time to present to us and answer our questions. And with that, we will move to testimony in support of AB 272. Anybody in person is invited up to the seats in front. We will start in Carson City, and you'll each have 2 minutes. Please begin whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel and committee members. My name is Drew Franklin, D-R-E-W-F-R-A-N-K-L-I-N with R&R Partners, here representing the Nevada Sheriffs and Chiefs Association. We are in support of Assembly Bill 272 and would like to thank Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno for bringing this bill forward. Mail theft continues to be a significant challenge for law enforcement throughout the state, leaving behind a tremendous negative impact on those victimized throughout Nevada. Mail theft often leads to identity theft, account takeovers, and credit card fraud, amongst other crimes. Victims often face severe credit damage and spend months or years trying to fix the damage done. This bill gives local law enforcement the ability to go after mail thieves with local charges, rather than rely on postal inspectors who are often stretched thin while attempting to cover a large assigned territory while trying to make time to go out and assist in investigations. This is especially challenging in the rural counties in Nevada, as the postal inspector is usually not able to make it to some of those locations. This is a local problem that affects the citizens and businesses of Nevada. The Nevada Sheriffs and Chiefs Association would respectfully request that you join us in supporting AB 272. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel, members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. My name is John Jones, here on behalf of the Nevada District Attorneys Association in support of AB 272. I want to start off by thanking Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno for working with us on our amendment. It does strike some language that references personal identifying information. As I'll get to in a second, that is its own statute. And that sort of leads me directly into the question that was asked by Senator Wynn about why we can't always prosecute possession of personal identifying information in every case. And not to get too technical, personal identifying information is basically any information that can be used to identify a person. That's a generic way of defining it. And if you possess it, we have to show that you had the purpose of establishing a false status, occupation, membership, license, or identity for yourself or somebody else. That possessing it for just that purpose would be a Category E felony. If you further had the intent to commit financial crimes while you're possessing the document, then the penalty is enhanced. In the case of unopened mail, I did phone a friend and speak to some of our screening deputies. If it's not clear what's in the envelopes that are being possessed, then the individual would have the argument that how could I be establishing a false identity when I didn't know what was inside the envelopes? And that is the issue that we're running to in that very specific set of circumstances. But what this bill does is it allows us to prosecute those who possess mail and knows or reasonably should know that the mail was unlawfully taken or obtained. And again, that's a fact-specific scenario, but if you've got mail with many different names of people on it, then I think that would evidence the fact that they should have known that it was unlawfully obtained. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Nick Schneider, representing the Vegas Chamber. We'd like to quickly thank the bill sponsor, Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno, for bringing this bill forward. We are in support of AB 272. Especially for our small and micro-sized businesses, mail theft represents a very major risk, not only to revenue, but as well as their business's reputation. And for that reason, we're in support of AB 272. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel, members of the committee. Jason Walker, Wash County Sheriff's Office, testifying in support of AB 272. This comes up quite often in Washoe County, and up until now, there's been no one arrested charged for being in possession of the mail, unlawful access to the mailbox keys, or gaining access to the community mailboxes. Again, this is a good bill. I urge your support.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Mike Cathcart, representing the City of Henderson. We want to thank the sponsor for bringing this legislation that will help in addressing the problem of mail theft in all communities in Nevada. The City of Henderson is in support of AB 272.
Thank you very much. We'll go now to people in person in Las Vegas wishing to give support testimony on AB 272.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Melody Hudilia. That's spelled MELODYJUDILLA, and I'm the Deputy Director of Silver State Voices, which leads the Let Nevadans Vote Coalition. I'm here in support of AB 272. Every day, the USPS and private mail carriers handle sensitive information, including ballots during election cycles. While the majority of mail is successfully delivered to its intended recipient, mail theft remains a significant issue, which can lead to serious consequences for individuals and businesses. In Nevada, last October, the Las Vegas Metro Police Department Northwest Area Command issued a warning via Twitter stating, mail theft is once again on the rise. Thieves are going after mail-in ballots, credit cards, etc., so please pick up your mail ASAP every day. Mail theft is already a serious concern, but is especially troubling during election cycles. In the 2022 general election, over 50% of Nevada voters voted via mail ballots. AB 272 is a positive step towards addressing these concerns. We thank the bill's sponsor, Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno, for bringing this bill forward, and I urge this committee's support. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel and committee members. My name is Mary Jana Ramos, and I'm the Nevada Campaign Manager for All Voting is Local Action Nevada, an organization that exists to expose and dismantle threats to voter freedom in order to make voting safe, fair, and accessible for all. All Voting is Local Action is also a member of the Let Nevada Vote Coalition, an organization that is composed of pro-voter organizations. We're here in strong support of AB 272, and I would like to say that it is concerning that our state currently lacks a mail theft statute to prosecute those responsible for such crimes. Mail theft, as stated throughout the presentation, can have negative consequences and could result in identity theft, financial losses, and legal disputes. While there have been no recorded incidents of ballots being stolen, we believe that this bill will provide added protections for mail-in ballots to ensure that they are received by the intended voter. We believe that this policy proposal is necessary to bring some peace of mind to all Nevadans and discourage bad actors from committing these crimes. We strongly urge this committee to support AB 272. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Aria Flores, ARIAFLORES, and I am here on behalf of Chispa, Nevada with the Let Nevadans Vote Coalition. We are in support of AB 272. This bill serves as a vital step towards safeguarding the democratic process and protecting the rights of our citizens. The consequences of mail theft, particularly when it targets mail-in ballots, are far-reaching and profoundly impact our democracy. By tampering with mail-in ballots, perpetrators aim to undermine the voices and the choices of individuals, effectively silencing their votes. This not only robs citizens of their rightful participation, but also erodes public trust and confidence in the integrity of the electoral system. AB 272 addresses this urgent issue by recognizing the severity of mail theft and proposing measures to combat it effectively. AB 272 ensures that those who commit mail theft face consequences. By reinforcing penalties for the international and willful destruction, damage, or theft of mail, AB 272 sends a strong message that these acts will not be tolerated. I encourage you to support AB 272. Thank you for your time.
All right, I don't see anybody else coming up to give in-person testimony in support of AB 272, so we'll go to the phones, please.
Chair, if you'd like to testify in support of AB 272, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. I'm Dayla Gibson, DAELA GIDSON. I'm representing Planned Parenthood Marmonte as part of the Let Nevadans Vote Coalition, and we support this bill and ditto other supportive testimony. Thank you.
We have no remaining callers testifying in support.
All right, then we'll move to testimony in opposition to AB 272. Anybody wishing to give opposition testimony in person is invited up to the chairs in the front in Carson City or Las Vegas. But I don't see anybody, so we will go to the phones for opposition testimony on AB 272.
If you would like to testify in opposition to AB 272, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. We have no further callers testifying in opposition.
All right, then we'll move to neutral testimony on AB 272. Anybody wishing to give in-person testimony is invited to do so now, but I don't see anybody coming to the front in Carson City or Las Vegas, so we'll go to the phones for neutral testimony on AB 272.
If you would like to testify in neutral for AB 272, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. We have no callers testifying in neutral at this time.
All right, thank you so much. I'll invite the bill sponsor up to make any closing remarks.
Danielle Monroe Moreno, for the record, just thank you for the opportunity to present the bill, and we hope to gain your support.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And with that, I will close the hearing on AB 272. We are going to move to our work session while I have everybody here. And so we will start with AB 17, and we have a consent calendar, right? Okay. Perfect. We're going to start with AB 35. It is the only bill on this agenda with an amendment to it, so that's why we're taking it by itself. Oh, 183. No, that's a reprint, but there's no amendment here. Yeah, it's going to, yeah. So, I stand by AB 35, and we'll hand it over to Mr. Guinan to walk us through the work session document.
Thanks, Chair. Patrick Guinan for the record. One typo on the bill page. It's not a Senate Committee on Judiciary bill. This is an Assembly Committee on Judiciary bill. Just wanted to make that clear. AB 35 revises provisions governing the access of offenders to telecommunications. The committee heard this bill on May 3rd. Remember, it was presented by Director Zarenda. It removes existing provisions authorizing offenders to have access to telecommunications devices and instead requires the director to adopt new regulations authorizing an offender to possess, have in his or her custody or control, and use a telecommunications device for certain purposes, including communicating with his or her child, appearing in court, receiving medical care, applying for a governmental program, performing legal research, and obtaining educational training. There is an amendment that was discussed during the hearing. It was offered by Jonathan Norman. That's just adds language explicitly allowing an offender to use these devices to communicate with their attorney. And the amendment is provided here for the committee, and that's all I have, Chair.
All right, any questions on AB 35? I don't see any questions, so I would entertain a motion to amend and do pass. All right, we have a motion from Senator Orenshaw and a second from Senator Wynn. Any discussion on the motion? Senator Stone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've received a number of emails on this, and I just want to clarify for the record that these devices are not being provided to inmates at taxpayer expense, that these are employed in 40 out of 50 states, that these inmates will not have unfettered access to the internet, only to sites that are approved and monitored by staff within the prison system. This will allow them to link to certain educational modules, actually allowing a convict to maybe leave prison with a bachelor's degree or some trade. They also cannot just communicate with anybody that they want to, especially forbidden parties, and only people that are approved by the warden and or the prison can receive communications that are monitored exactly the same as any telephone calls are monitored by prison staff. So for those reasons, I urge an aye vote on this.
Thank you. Other discussion on the motion? Senator Krasner.
Thank you, Chair. I also have received numerous emails on AB 35, and I'm going to be voting no on it. I spoke to multiple people that said inmates don't have anything to do all day except, spend their time doing something, and they can easily take a child's Game Boy and rig it so that it gets internet access. They also said they had a real problem with giving free electronic devices to inmates. Why don't we give them to children in the rurals? They also said they didn't like the idea of helping people that were incarcerated for felonies to get bachelor's degrees. They also had concerns about inmates finding a way, maybe through a third-party call, to harass a victim or a witness. And so for all these reasons, I'll be voting no. Thank you.
All right. Any other discussion on the motion? Senator Orenshaw.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm supporting the bill with the amendment. I think we heard a lot of testimony about the potential not only for inmates to make progress towards their education, but to receive therapy. I think we've all seen commercials now that talk about people being able to see a therapist through the internet, through an app, and I think that will help some inmates. We heard testimony about inmates that are physically not well enough to sometimes leave their cell, but would be able to have therapy sessions, perhaps even telemedicine. I think that there was a lot of testimony from Director Zarenda about how much supervision there would be over this. And I think that ultimately, if our goal is to see folks who are incarcerated either serve their time, expire their sentence, or be released on parole and succeed, I think that this will help inmates educationally, with telemedicine, with therapy. I think there are a lot of positive things that will help lead inmates to be successful and not end up back at an NDOC facility. So I'll be supporting it.
Thank you. Senator Wynn.
Thank you. I'd echo my colleagues in their support of this bill as well. I also see this as an officer and correctional officer safety issue as well. This puts them less at risk. They have people that are getting the resources, getting the therapy, getting the educational training, using their minds for something that's positive, and they are not getting into trouble. They are not getting into fights. They are not putting our officers that are already overworked and are understaffed in our prison systems. So for those reasons, in addition to my colleagues here that have also made statements in support, I'm in support of this bill and urge my colleagues to do the same.
Senator Dondero Loop.
Thank you very much. I'm going to put the education spin on it. I, in another generation of my life, worked for a company that had a literacy product that helped K through 12 increase their literacy skills and be able to read news articles. And I would suggest that many of our people that are in the prison system may gain some knowledge and may be able to get their GED. There's all kinds of things that maybe get some math skills so that when they get out, they can go into another profession rather than the one they were in. So I would suggest that these are helpful in the education space, and that I think it's really important that when those inmates are there, that they have that opportunity.
Thank you very much. All right, not seeing any further discussion, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. All right, the motion carries with one nay from Senator Krasner, and I will take the floor statement on this one because I am strongly Team Tablet. And I'll turn it over to Patrick Guinan for the next three bills, which are on a consent calendar.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to go through these all in one bunch real quickly, unless the members have questions or anything. So, Assembly Bill 17 we heard here on the 21st of April. It's an Assembly Judiciary Committee bill. It simply removes the requirement that a person convicted of driving under the influence of alcohol or a controlled substance must dress in distinctive garb while performing community service. Then Assembly Bill 68, sponsored by Assemblyman Yeager, we heard here on the 26th. This is a reformulation of the calculation of assessments owed by counties for operating a regional facility for treatment and rehabilitation of children. And then Assembly Bill 183, which is Assembly Judiciary Committee bill that came from the interim. 183 was heard here on the 21st, and it requires local, regional, and state facilities for the detention or treatment and rehabilitation of children to screen children to determine whether they've been the victim of child sexual exploitation, commercial sexual exploitation, and to report on those assessments and to take actions to protect the safety of those children if they are determined to be a victim. And that's it.
All right, so we'll start with any questions on any of these three bills. I don't see any questions, so I would accept a motion to do pass. We have a motion from Senator Stone. We have a second from Senator Orenshaw. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any discussion, we'll go to a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. All right, it looks like we have a unanimous vote to do pass those three bills. Is there a volunteer for the AB 17 floor statement? All right, it goes to Senator Harris. How about the AB 68 floor statement? It goes to Senator Orenshaw. How about the AB 183 statement? Okay, it goes to Senator Don Gerald Loop. You got to be quick over here if you want to get a floor statement, apparently. And that brings us to the conclusion of our work session. And we will now move on to our hearing on AB 275. I will open up the hearing now and invite our presenters to the front to begin whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Chair Scheibel and members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. It's an honor to be here to present AB 275 today. For the record, I'm Assemblywoman Melissa Hardy, and I represent Assembly District 22 in Clark County. I'm here today to present Assembly Bill 275, which revises provisions governing the sealing of criminal records relating to victims of sex trafficking. And I'm pleased to have with me today Ms. Lisa Mosley-Sales from Nevada Fines and Fees Justice Center. Early in my time as a lawmaker, I had the opportunity to meet and hear the stories of victims. Their bravery and strength astounded me, but I was also struck by some of the more modern inconveniences visited upon them as they worked to build new lives. In the 2021 session, I worked on AB 113, which extended the statute of limitations for prosecutions of sex trafficking crimes. That bill, like this, was a practical, common-sense policy done in a bipartisan fashion. It is my belief that good policy knows no party affiliation, and we can tackle these issues as lawmakers with no daylight between us. In preparation for this session, I knew I wanted to build on the work that I had done in this area in 2021. I worked with several coalitions to discuss and determine what policy recommendations would be beneficial and what advocates wanted to see brought forward. And this bill is a result of that work. So going to the bill, in section, basically, we'll just go to section 1, sub 9, and it just basically that no fee may be charged by any court or agency of criminal justice in this state related to a petition for the sealing of records pursuant to this section if at the time the crime for which the records to be sealed was committed, the petitioner was being sex trafficked pursuant to NRS 201.300. And during the assembly hearing, questions were asked regarding, the person, some kind of statement that they were indeed a victim of sex trafficking. And so that is the amendment in this reprint, which is in section 1, 3E. Okay. Which says, if applicable, include a statement from the petitioner certifying that at the time the crime for which the records to be sealed was committed, the petitioner was being sex trafficked pursuant to NRS 201.300. I wanted to share some statistics with you, which I believe might give some context. It is estimated that 3.8 million adults and 1 million children are trafficked or forced sexual exploitation per year. That is larger than the entire population of the state of Nevada. Of those, women and girls are disproportionately affected by human trafficking, representing more than 70% of all victims. According to the State Department, there are as many as 27.6 million victims worldwide at any given time. The number of perpetrators facing punishment for this crime increases every year, but the numbers of victims show less fluctuation. Many of the victims may not have homes or communities to return to. They need the necessities, food, clothing, a roof. Their trauma is prolonged and resulting disabilities are common. Post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, depression, alienation, disorientation, aggression, and more psychological disturbances are also common. These victims have been robbed of their confidence and self-worth. The road to recovery is very, very long and largely unimaginable for those who haven't lived it. We as a society are getting better and learning more every day, but much work remains to be done, and I believe that AB 275 is one more step down that path, another step forward toward justice for victims. So now I'd like to ask Ms. Mosley to give her remarks, and then we would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Hardy. Greetings, Chair Scheibel, committee members, and to all of the advocates that are in the audience today and that may be watching and supporting us via television. I want to say thank you, Madam Chair, for hearing this bill, and to thank Assemblywoman Hardy for bringing this bill and allowing me to include some language and to work with her on this bill. At the Fines and Fees Justice Center, we've had the opportunity to work really closely with people who have had fees levied against them in the criminal legal system for various crimes, including, unfortunately, sex trafficking. We've seen firsthand what fees can do to someone who's trying to get their life back on track, as many victims of sex trafficking are working to do today. Fees in the criminal legal system, they present all kinds of obstacles, as Assemblywoman Hardy mentioned, present just different kinds of obstacles for people who are trying to get their life back on track. Criminal records can prevent individuals from getting jobs, from getting housing in many cases. You all may remember that prior to 2013, Nevada had no laws on the books related to sex trafficking. Anyone who was accused or suspected of engaging in illegal sex work was turned over to federal law enforcement for prosecution. And unfortunately, that included people who were being trafficked. Those folks were also turned over to federal law enforcement and simply charged federally. The result of that is that many people who are victims now have criminal records. And though Nevada now has stricter laws to protect people, particularly women and girls, but also boys, who have been victims of sex trafficking, there are victims, again, who have criminal records that stem from these kinds of charges. Recently, Nevada has committed resources. We have task force, we have grant funding that's coming into the state, going to law enforcement, and all kinds of educational resources, community resources, education, that's really educating people on the perils of sex trafficking. So we are making great strides to end this practice and to stave off as much as possible. I think the last piece of that is working with victims who would like to get their records sealed and get their life back on track. And unfortunately, there are some really high fees that we can talk about if you have questions about what those fees look like. We do have some of that information. So with that, I will stand with, I don't want to say stand because that kind of sounds ableist sometimes. We will open ourselves up for questions if you have them. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. Any questions from members of the committee? Senator Stone?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Assemblywoman Hardy, for bringing this forward. I did look at some of the fees that would be waived, and they're really de minimis, ranging from anywhere from like $45 to $100. So I think that's a small price to pay to give these victims a clean foot forward, if you will. The only question that I have is that if a trafficker is being convicted and the name of the victim is brought into a court case where the trafficker is ultimately convicted, right? Would this bill in any way allow for the redaction of the name of that victim in the court reporting, if you will, of the traffic person that's been convicted? I just worry that with Google searches that you can still find reference to these poor souls that are trafficked. And I was just wondering if that was even a possibility. I'm not a lawyer, as you know, but I worry about their identity being, muddied up when they shouldn't be.
Lisa Mosley Sales. I don't know that this bill will address that. I think that would probably be a better question for some of the attorneys that are in the audience that may be supporting who actually work on record sealing fees. What this bill will do is any criminal record that someone who was a victim of sex trafficking, a criminal record during that time, would give them the ability to apply to have the fees that are associated with sealing that criminal record, have those fees waived.
And I appreciate that. I was just kind of piggybacking. I want to protect these victims as much as I can. And if there's another way that we can protect them, maybe it'd be a purpose for a future bill, but I just want to know if we can protect them as well. Thank you.
And I'll just chime in, and I don't know if legal wants to also chime in, but Nevada does have a series of statutes that protect the names of victims who are under the age of 18 and victims of sexual offenses, so that their names are not printed in full in things like a criminal complaint or a judgment of conviction. So nothing's perfect. The internet's still there, but we do have laws in place that are intended to protect them from exactly what you mentioned, a simple Google search or Facebook search or something like that. Other questions? All right. I don't see any other questions. So thank you for your presentation. We will go to testimony in support of AB 275, starting with people present in Carson City or Las Vegas. I don't see anybody in Las Vegas, so we'll just start with Carson City and go ahead whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel and members of the committee. My name is Caitlin Gwynn, Caitlin Gwin. I'm here today as a representative of a group of survivors of human trafficking, sex workers, researchers, and resource providers. We are in support of AB 275 and would particularly like to thank the Assemblywoman for the amendment allowing petitioner survivors to self-certify. This amendment will allow survivors to take control and agency over their own stories and gives them an opportunity for a fresh start after arrest and trafficking. I'd like to share some data with you from the Nevada Department of Public Safety. So from 2014 to 2022, the number of prostitution-related arrests in Nevada was 15,032. The number of trafficking-related arrests was 337. This means that our primary tool against fighting human trafficking is arresting sex workers and victims of human trafficking. The best way to ensure that victims are not forced back into coercive situations is to ensure that they have a clean record so they can access housing, employment, other resources and opportunities. This self-certification, therefore, is essential because in most cases, there's no evidence to show that this person was a victim beyond their own testimony. It's extremely important that we have this tool in there, and again, we'd really like to thank the Assemblywoman and Ms. Mosley for this amendment. Again, we are in support, and we thank everyone for the open-mindedness in dealing with this nuanced subject. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Erica Roth, ERICAROTH, on behalf of the Washoe County Public Defender's Office. I first want to thank the bill sponsor for bringing this forward, and I want to echo the comments of Ms. Gwynn. What I will add, and I've said this before, and I will continue to say this, is that my clients are victims of sex trafficking. The system is criminalizing them, and although we have moved away from prosecutions directly related to sex work, we are still prosecuting them for many related crimes, and that can include theft, that can include living from the earnings of a prostitute. And so this is a very important first step in ensuring that women or people who have been victims of sex trafficking are given a clean slate and able to move forward. But I do hope that as these conversations continue to happen, that we are able to have a larger conversation about how penalties and increasing penalties generally are actually affecting victims of sex trafficking specifically. But we do urge your support and passage of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. John Puro from the Clark County Public Defender's Office. We stand in strong support of this bill. We've been working on record sealing since 2017 in this body, and we've made great strides, and this is just another step in the right direction. To Senator Stone's point, I think at some point in time, we'll have to have a conversation both nationally and stateswise about what can be done regarding internet things that never go away. Because if we're going to give somebody a fresh start, we kind of want them to have a fresh start.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel. Members of the Senate Judiciary Committee, my name is John Jones here on behalf of the Nevada District Attorneys Association in support of the bill, and we also want to thank Assemblywoman Hardy for bringing it. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel, members of the committee. My name is Jimmy Lau with Ferrari Reader Public Affairs representing Dignity Health St. Rose Dominican. St. Rose has proudly supported efforts to assist people who have been victims of sex trafficking in previous sessions. We'd like to thank the Assemblywoman for bringing this bill. Part of our advocacy, which is mission-driven, is addressing social determinants of health, and one of the most important things for folks who have been victims of sex trafficking is being able to get their life back on track. So we urge the committee's support of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see anybody else coming up to give in-person support testimony, so we'll go to the phones for support testimony on AB 275.
If you would like to testify in support of AB 275, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel and members of the committee. My name is Kimberly Harvey, H-A-R-V-E-Y, and I co-chair the Nevada Policy Council on Human Trafficking. On behalf of the Policy Council, I want to state our continued support for AB 275 and thank Assemblywoman Hardy for her dedicated leadership in protecting those affected by human trafficking in our state. This bill demonstrates that support for victims and survivors by reducing a small part of the unnecessary trauma and financial burdens they might encounter throughout their journey. Thank you.
That concludes all callers to testify.
All right. We'll move to testimony in opposition to AB 275. If there's anybody in opposition in person, now is the time. But I don't see anybody in Carson City or Las Vegas, so we'll go to the phones for opposition testimony on AB 275.
If you would like to testify in opposition to AB 275, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. We have no callers testifying in opposition.
All right, then we'll move to neutral testimony on AB 275. I don't see anybody here to give in-person testimony in Carson City or Las Vegas, so we'll once again go to the phones for neutral testimony on AB 275.
Chair, we have no callers remaining in the queue to testify at this time.
All right, then. That brings us to the conclusion of our hearing on AB 275, unless you have any closing remarks. Sorry, please, come up and give closing remarks.
Thank you again, Chair and Committee, for hearing this bill. I want to thank the victims and the advocates and all those that worked with me on this bill. And just want to say that it would be naive to assume that the small steps that we take here in this building will end the scourge of human trafficking. But we do have a flashlight, and we can shine that straight into the darkness, illuminating by small acts of compassion the way forward for victims. So thank you all, and I hope that you will support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I will close the hearing on AB 275, and that takes us to public comment. Anybody wishing to give public comment in person is invited to do so now, but I don't see anybody in person, so we'll go to the phones for public comment, please.
We have no callers to provide public comment at this time.
All right, then that brings us to the end of our meeting. We do not have a meeting tomorrow. We will have another meeting on Monday at 1 p.m. And so we hope that you all have a safe and relaxing weekend. And until Monday, we are adjourned.